So first of all, Happy New Year. Second of all, I'm back with more Planet Zoo. But we're trying something new because I want to post more often, and so I'm going to be trying to make some shorter content. In this case, I'm going to be making an aardvark habitat. But first, because this was a new zoo, I had to set up the starting path and add the staff buildings. After which I pulled out the terrain tool to make this little raised terrain section sort of situation that I also added a water source in the middle of. I used the chain link barrier around that, and after fiddling with it for quite a while to make it look nice, I hated it. But I wanted to try and expand my horizons and not just use the wood barrier all the time. So I decided to continue on with the habitat. And if I didn't like it after it was more finished, I'd change it. I used this log rope blueprint I had saved to cover the front of the habitat. And then I put null barriers over that so that the game would actually count it as a habitat. After which I placed down the staff door and bought the aardvarks I was going to need. I tried having them delivered to the habitat, but I had forgotten to hire staff, so I had to do that first. After which they brought me my aardvarks. And after double checking the traversable area to make sure they could actually climb the hill I made, I pulled out some large rocks to line the back of the habitat with, because I thought the barrier along the back looked rather unsightly. They were able to escape over my rocks, though, so I had to place quite a lot of rocks to make sure that wasn't an issue anymore. I placed a few of these boom palms around, after which I pulled out these fig trees to sink into the rocks. I had to be careful about how many I added, though, because I didn't want to massively go over their coverage needs. But I did want the back of the habitat to look lush with greenery. And so after I had the fig trees in place, I went back through and changed the barriers to null barriers along the back before moving them up as far as I could, which moved a good amount of the fig trees out of their barrier and put the aardvark's coverage needs back into the green. Not that it was gonna stay in the green though, because I still wanted to add some bushes into the actual habitat. I went with these dog rose bushes because I liked how bright green and cheerful they looked. And then because I was a good way into finishing this habitat and I still didn't like how the chain link barrier looked, I changed it to wood. Which is where I should have started because I knew the chain link was gonna irk me until I changed it. I then spent almost 10 minutes trying to build them a shelter before getting fed up with it and just placing down an animal burrow. I gave them all the enrichment items they would need before pulling up the terrain tab and covering their whole habitat in sand, which was way more sand than what they wanted. So I lined the back with grass and pulled out the rock terrain to add it to the steep part of this raised edge. I then pulled out the short grass, which I tried to be sparing with, even though they do prefer a mostly grass habitat, only because I wanted the sandy rocks I used along the back to stay tied into the overall theme, which meant trying to keep that sand color sprinkled throughout. I then added soil around the water and along the areas that would probably get the most foot traffic. After the soil was in place, I went over it with grass to make the edges less harsh and have it blend in more. And after redefining some areas, that was the terrain done, which means it's rock time. So I placed down my rock bundle, completely forgetting that this was a new zoo and I didn't have infinite money, but that was an issue for later. For now, I picked up a cluster of these savanna rocks to add along the edge of my rock barrier. I started with the inside first, also adding a few rocks to the water. And while I was doing the rocks along the back, I ran out of money. So I was gonna have to let the game run for a minute to get more. On the bright side though, the ball enrichment I added to the habitat was perpetually rolling down the hill, only to go out of bounds and respawn to do it all over again. And that was very amusing to me. And it was while watching this endless cycle that I had the thought that I probably didn't need all the different types of rocks right now. And so I sold the ones I didn't need and continued on. I also needed a water treatment facility though, so most of the money went towards that. I was able to add all the rocks I wanted along the back of the barrier though. I then deleted all the rocks in and around the water because I didn't like how they looked. Instead I added bigger savanna rocks and went about placing a waterfall, which took way longer than I thought it would to add, and I don't actually end up keeping it there, but that's okay. I worked on the burrow next, adding rocks around it so it didn't look like a strange mound in the middle of the habitat. I then sacrificed a fig tree or two from the back so that I could add some greenery to the burrow, and I was really happy with how this habitat was shaping up. However, because not everything can go to plan, the aardvarks were getting stressed. And despite not wanting to add any one-way glass, because I really like how it looked now, and more importantly, the ball's endless cycle of falling out of the habitat would be ruined, I had to add one-way glass. And it honestly didn't look that bad. But after staring at it for a second, the waterfall just didn't look right, so I took it out and added a rubber ducky in its place. And that was this habitat done. Which means that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you did enjoy watching, maybe consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.